Good morning and welcome everyone to PW Only IS English channel. In the today's news analysis for 15th of March 2025, we are going to have a look at these issues. Hike Manrega wages. Parliamentary Standing Committee on Rural Development has highlighted the issue of wage disparity across the states of India when it comes to the Manrega payment. In some states it is as low as 234 and in Haryana it is 374 rupees. So why such a disparity when Article 1 says that India, that is Bharat, is a union of states? We are going to study this issue in detail today. Then India denies role in Pakistan train attack. A very beautiful statement by Ministry of External Affairs says that the whole world knows where the epicenter of terrorism lies. And why are you putting the blame on India? Pakistan at this stage faces the existential crisis when it comes to the crisis by Balochistan Liberation Army, then ATF, ISI, etc. Now, moving further, these are the important news articles. First one is purely factual. India adds 6 properties to tentative list of UNESCO. So this is the tentative list. What is the criteria of adding it into the tentative list? Whether they will be actually admitted into the UNESCO final list or not. So we are going to study this issue. These issues are relevant for prelims mainly. Now, hike Manreka wages. We have already seen this. How the US supports its farmers at a time when we are seeing a kind of tariff war going on between the two countries and we are negotiating a trade deal with the US. The support for farmers, how much support is given by the US on an average to any of its farmers is quite high when compared to the Indian side. Then datanomics, India needs to innovate, spend more on innovation, cut debt. Our debt is around 68% of GDP compared to the upper middle income countries. We are very high. We are having a very high debt. So we need to cut this down in order to achieve the target of Viksit Bharat by 2047. Then Parliamentary Standing Committee flags the underuse of health information. So why the health infrastructure mission is not taking off? The same phenomena, that of allocating more funds but not spending even 50% of it, is visible here as well. I would like to tell you briefly about our courses and 80% discount that is going across PW, only IS, UPSC, all the courses. You talk about Prahar, you talk about Titan batch. You can consider joining these courses to streamline your preparation and give a direction to your preparation with the help of teachers like me who are teaching polity, economy. The entire syllabus of UPSC will be taken care of through the medium of these courses. And PW has been enriching its courses with the help of daily mains practice question, daily prelims practice questions also. So it's not only about the discount, it's about the quality of the courses, the way we are streamlining these courses, which is definitely going to help you streamline your preparation and give the direction to it. Let's get started with the first news article of the day. Manrega wages, even though they are linked to consumer price index for agricultural laborers, but the point is the discretion lies in the hands of the state governments or the government of India to whether actually pay that higher wage or not. Periodic indexation and periodic revision of the wages is what is lacking here. Okay, so this is the first issue that this news article highlights. As per section 27, you should be knowing about these sections also. As per section 27 of Manrega Act 2005, it allows the stoppage of the funds for violation of rules in the implementation of the scheme. So certain states, primarily the opposition ruled states like West Bengal, which is ruled by Trinamool Congress, so their funds have been choked by the Ministry of Rural Development, which is the parent ministry looking after, Union Ministry of Rural Development is looking after your Manrega. So Manrega funds to the West Bengal government have been stopped because of irregularities. Well, corruption in any form, in any scheme is not tolerated at all. Nonetheless, stoppage of the funds is victimizing, is hurting the interests of the workers more than anybody else, more than any ruling political party or opposition political party. So this is the issue, second issue that has been highlighted in this news article. Third issue that has been highlighted is the problem of payment delays and funding issues. So payment delays by, delaying the funds to the extent that the next budget year starts by April 2025. So the effective budget for Manrega comes down. You look at these numbers here, total pending liabilities under Manrega were 23,446 crores, and this includes 1200 in 2019, 219 crores in wage dues. So wages, then material, 12,000 worth crore rupees of material payment backlog is also there. So this in a way reduces the effective allocation for the new year 2025-2026 to just 62,000 crore rupees. And even though supplementary grants are allowed, later on the ministry, if it requires, if it likes, it can increase the supplementary grants. But Manrega has been the backbone of people, distressed migrant workers, landless laborers who out migrate from the rural areas into the urban areas search of work. So that is the issue here. If you do not allocate sufficient budgets in the first go and later on rely on supplementary grants, etc., and even deduct out of 86,000 crore rupees allocated for this year the payment backlog, because Manrega is not a non-lapsable kind of a scheme. Anything that is not spent in 1 year will lapse and go to the Consolidated Fund of India, and anything that has been spent but not allocated will effectively be deducted out of the next year's allocation. So 23,000 crore rupees, if deducted out of this year's 86,000 crore rupees, we are left with barely 62,000 crore rupees. Even as in the years after COVID-19, we have seen that allocation has been the requirement has been around 1,10,000 crore rupees. Problems with Manrega are the union government says that one problem is that it is with the name Gandhi. Okay, so it means that the benefit goes to Gandhi family, which is the opposition party Congress. The other major problem is the assets quality is not durable. To make sure that the durable assets are constructed under Manrega, a lot of changes have been brought about under the Manrega. That is material to wages ratio, which earlier used to be 40 is to 60. 40% of the Manrega money used to be spent on material and 60% would be spent on the labor, payment of the wages. Now the scenario is that 49% of the money could now be spent on the component part, the material part, cement, iron rods, etc., so as to instill a sense of durability into the assets. Okay, so this is how the scheme guidelines have been tinkered with in the past 5, 6, 7 years so as to make the quality of assets durable. This is how we can address the concerns of the union government, the central government, the Ministry of Rural Development, so that the poor workers, the landlessness in India is increasing, and the extent of drought, extent of climate vagaries is also increasing. So Manrega acts as a cushion during such times, and every time when there is a monsoon vagary or monsoon shortfall, then only increasing the Manrega funds is not the way out. Rather, we can use the Manrega funds to create ponds, to store water during the good times of monsoon, during the good monsoon years. So this is how Manrega needs to be rationalized. Rather than cutting down on the funding, we need to look at it as a way to relieve people of distressed migration. So urban people leaving behind their the rural people, rural folks, they have to leave behind their families, their land, etc., to migrate for the urban areas, thereby further increasing the burden on the urban areas, which are already 4 5 metro cities of India. Okay, they are already overburdened with the population overload. So look at it, look at the Manrega in a constructive way. Government needs to have this kind of an outlook towards Manrega scheme. So three problems we have highlighted here. From my side, I have given you 2 3 solutions. Problem number one is budget has been cut down. Okay, second problem, important problem that has been highlighted here is the Manrega wages are not being linked to, are not being revised, even though they are being linked to your consumer price index for agricultural laborers, but they are not being periodically revised. Periodic revision is another issue. And the disparity that exists, second point number B, you can write here. The problem is disparity. In states like Nagaland, we are paying just 236 rupees, 234 rupees, whereas in Punjab we are paying 374 rupees as the wages. So workers have an incentive to migrate to Punjab, even if Punjab or Haryana or Uttar Pradesh, even if they want to work as the private agricultural laborer in the states benefited by the Green Revolution, then also they can migrate to Punjab because they will get wages around 5 600 rupees. The private Manrega wager or daily wager gets around 5 to 600 rupees as the wages. The baildar that we call him, 700 rupees is the wage rate on the labor chocks in India. So government needs to match that up so that people don't have to migrate out from the rural areas. The third issue we have seen is that payment backlog is not being cleared on time, thereby dissuading, thereby discouraging the material suppliers. For example, Ramlal Cement Store will never supply, for example, this is the name is, will never supply cement to the Manrega contractor, Manrega, machinery for the implementation of the project, for the reason that payments are not released on time. And already for Manrega type of a work, for bulk purchases, they sell at a wafer thin margin, at a very low margin to Manrega, to the government, because of the tendering, because of the price issue, the upper limit of the price at which you can buy cement, iron rods, etc. So already when the margin is very low and payment is delayed on the top of it, it becomes highly discouraging for the material suppliers to supply funds for Manrega's implement, to supply the material for Manrega's implementation even, right? So these are the three issues that you can take a note of. Rather, I have been suggesting in the news analysis videos also that we need Manyuga also, Mahatma Gandhi National Urban Employment Guarantee Act, because of mushrooming of slums in our countries. Okay, even though government has been giving Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana households, urban households, urban areas also, rural areas also, but households, I mean, allocating the house is solving the part of the problem. If the person allocated the house is not able to have the fire in his chulha, in his stove, he's not able to have two times meal a day, which comes from the regular income from the schemes like Manyuga, then what is the point of allocating the house? So let's hope that rather than just compromising with the Manrega, government also thinks of the scheme like Manyuga. Now, guys, this issue of how US supports its farmers becomes even more important in the light of the fact that India and US are having trade negotiations, and agriculture as an area becomes an important bone of contention. US wants India to reduce the subsidies to the agriculturists, to the farmers. Now, if you look at the number of farmers in the US, which they call as family farms, 1.82 million, merely 18 lakh 20,000, right? And in India, you have agricultural households around 93 lakh 9,000. So the number is quite huge. Despite their small numbers, US farmers have a higher median household income than the overall US median. Now, here what happens is India provides the back-end subsidies in the form of free electricity, free water, etc., for the free fertilizers or subsidized fertilizers for the farmers. And front end subsidies are also provided in India in the form of this minimum support price for 22-23 crops by CACP, Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices. US has got an objection for this thing. Why? Because US says that you are providing too much to your farmers. Whereas if we look at these numbers, US is providing the support to its farmers primarily through price loss coverage and agriculture risk coverage. This is similar to the insurance in India, and this is similar to MSP in India. Now, what is price loss coverage? Rather than doing the upfront buying as is done by FCI in India, Food Corporation of India, okay, US compensates the farmers in case of any bumper crop, in case of any price crash. It happens in India also, like whenever there's a bumper crop for onion, potato, tomato, etc., the prices crash and farmers have to sell their produce for a pittance, for a very nominal amount, 2 rupees per kg, 3 rupees per kg. And on the top of it, we are seeing corporatization of agriculture, where PepsiCo and where Lay's companies, chips making companies, are purchasing these produce at an even lower price. Now, during this time, the US wants that you should stop these subsidies on fertilizers. These are called back end subsidies, as I just said, then electricity, water, etc., to in order to underprice these inputs by the farmers. Diesel subsidy was provided in India till 2010. That was also an important input insofar as running of the tube wells to fetch groundwater was concerned. Now here in US does not intervene on the output side also prima facie, and on the input side also, unlike India. But if you look at the quantum of the support that is provided to the US farmers for around 22 crops, and the number of crops is also similar to the crops that are purchased at MSP in India by the Consumer for Agriculture Cost and Prices. The prices are determined every year, and FCI and state warehousing corporations are purchasing this. Now, PLC payments are triggered when the average market price for a covered commodity falls below its effective reference price. So they determine an effective reference price, and if the price is below this effective reference price, then the farmers are compensated for the shortfall. This way, they are not providing that, the US does not come across as providing the upfront subsidy. This is where the US wants, Indian farmers to be decompensated or to be compensated to the lesser extent. Well, is it good for India? Let us look at it. In India, MSP is often criticized for fueling inflation. So, if effective this reference price kind of a phenomena is brought out, then inflation as a demerit, inflation as a flaw, as a kind of disincentive for MSP, for purchasing at MSP, you are in a way fueling the price of the crop which was otherwise selling at 32 rupees, wheat grain. By purchasing it at 40 rupees, FCI is in itself triggering inflation, which is quite right. But the problem here is we don't have the scientific data for the farmlands as the US has got it. Okay, and our farmlands are fragmented, and then the effective reference point, how would that be determined for a country of the size of India? We have logistical issues in that, though we are already working in that direction. We here support the US pressure, we here support the US point that we should also devise something of the nature of effective reference point price, so that we do not domestically fuel inflation, and yet at the same time we meet the WTO criteria of blue box, amber box, and green box subsidies meant for scientific R&D into the agriculture. However, this MSP requires the physical in India. MSP requires the physical purchase of crops by the government, which, according to Shanta Kumar Committee appointed by the Modi government in 2014, is also a drain. It's ridden with corruption. Okay, so Shanta Kumar Committee said that we should abolish this MSP kind of a system and instead bring out something of the nature of ERP only. So remember the Shanta Kumar Committee finding also in the light of appearance of this news article in the newspaper today. So this is all in this issue. Now they have supplemented, they have tried to put life into the argument with the help of the numbers here. You see direct payments to the US agricultural producers under the federal farm programs. That means the union government of the president's programs, you can say. Okay, so federal programs in the US, they have support up to $9.3 billion to 45.6 billion in the recent years. In some of the years, it has ranged around $10 billion, which amounts to roughly 88,000 crore rupees per year. Or sometimes it has shot up to the level of 45.6. A December 2024 report from the US Government Accountability Office, similar to our CAG office, has highlighted that total financial assistance to agricultural producers from 2019 to 2023 was 161 billion. So if you divide it by 5, the support comes to around 35 to 40 billion dollar per year, right? Program distribution, this 161 billion dollar was distributed by the US Department of Agriculture. So this is all data here. Look at the Indian data side. Total Indian farmer support, including fertilizers, crop loan, the much criticized subsidies by the WTO member countries, by the Western countries especially, MSP, etc. Everything comes to around rupees 5 lakh crore rupees, $57.5 billion. Now the US says that this is quite high when compared to $32.2 billion. So US is a rich country, it can invest in R&D, etc., research and development, high yielding variety of seeds, whereas we are not as highly invested in the R&D. So that is the problem, that is the difference between the two countries, and the ground realities are quite different. The US farmers are educated, they know how much of urea fertilizer to apply compared to the Indian farmers. India's PM Kisan program, similar to the other support program of the US government, has over 111 million beneficiaries, receiving rupees 6,000 per year for better inputs into the agriculture, to provide money to the farmers so that they can invest better in the agricultural inputs, you can say, high yielding variety of seeds, etc. So this is a kind of, we are moving from an era of subsidizing the agricultural inputs to directly putting the income money into the hands of the kisan, the farmer. In contrast, the average US producer receives a federal payment of rupees 26.8 lakh, because there are only 18 lakh farm families, whereas in India we have 93 lakh people who are supported through governments these programs. So this is the difference, that US farmer is already receiving this much amount of money, even though agriculture is not as remunerative in the US as well. Okay, so you see the vast difference in the per farmer support between the US and India. And despite that, we face the pressure from the US that India needs to cut down the subsidies it provides to its farmers. WTO's special and differential treatment. WTO rules provide for special and differential treatment for developing countries, including India, including non-reciprocity in trade concessions. Reciprocity means that if US is not supporting its farmers, India can still support. So India need not match the US level of support, or US need not ask India to cut down subsidies because US is cutting down on the subsidies. Reciprocal arrangement is not essential when it comes to the negotiations on the farm subsidies. That is the crux of this line here. Now, negotiating concerns are there. The question remains whether the principle of non reciprocity will be upheld in the current bilateral US India agricultural trade negotiations. Under the umbrella of WTO, the trade negotiations are between various countries. It is a kind of multilateral arrangement. Whereas when we are negotiating with the US, uh, bilaterally, whether US is going to observe this principle of non-reciprocity, that is the moot question. Now, datanomics. India needs to innovate, cut debt to become developed by 2047. This news article is basically saying that India's GDP growth has been up to X number. It needs to be up to Y or Z number in order for India to be called as a Viksit Bharat, a developed country, to become upper middle income class country. Right now we are hovering around 6.2% to 6.4% if the decadal average growth rate is looked at. But World Bank says that India needs to grow at 7.8% between these years 2024 till 2047 in order to achieve the objective of being called a developed country, in Hindi a Viksit Bharat. Okay, now let's look at the further numbers. India's GDP grew at an annual average of 6.7%. This detail becomes important for prelims between 2000 to 2019. Okay, before COVID, you can say. Then, from 2020, 2021 to 24-25, growth slowed to 5.4%. This is the post-COVID period of growth. 5.4%. So, this is also important for prelims, and this is also important, but it was still higher. Even though India's growth was sluggish, but it was still higher than other major economies, including China, thanks to our labor, cheap labor availability in our country, thanks to the demographic dividend, thanks to the huge domestic market, and factors like that. Income status and comparisons. Current income status. India is currently a lower middle income country as per World Bank scheme of things, as per the World Bank categorization. Why? Because India's per capita gross national income is around $2540. That means per average an Indian is getting allocated, if the whole GDP of India is to be divided by gross national income of India is to be divided by its total population, then we all should be getting around $2540. Gini coefficient apart. We are not talking about equal distribution of income over here. Okay. Talk about projected income status. At the current growth rate of around 6.7%, India will become a upper middle income class country by 2032. UMIC have a per capita GNI between $4,516 and $14,000. So we will just enter this bracket from $4,500, and maybe we will achieve this $14,000 status by 2047. So this bracket is quite huge in terms of range. You see, $4,500 if any country's citizen is getting per capita, so that country enters the bracket of upper middle income class country. So the standard of living, the air conditioners, the four wheelers, the washing machines, the per capita usage of electricity goes into this. Okay, standard of living, 24/7 electricity, all these factors. Now, R&D, where are we lagging behind? The report says that, World Bank report says that when it comes to R&D, India's expenditure is pretty low, 0.39%. Okay, when it comes to comparison with upper middle income class countries that reach the high income status, they are spending around 0.5. But if we talk about trapped upper middle income class countries, the ones who are not able to rise above, they are spending around 0.73% of their GDP on research and development. Talk about AI, talk about machine learning, etc. etc. Trade openness, percentage of GDP, 46.3%. So India stands good here. Then 76.5%, 54.6%. So what does this trade openness comprise of? FDI reforms. Okay, how much time does it take to set up a factory, to get all the licensing requirements done, etc. etc. Then patent application per million people. Per 10 lakh people in India, we are applying only for just applications, I'm saying 13. Whereas if you talk about UMICs, 59 patent applications per 10 lakh population. Now, 31 trapped UMICs, the ones which are not able to rise above that level, they are filing 31 patent applications per 10 lakh population. Agriculture, now percentage of GVA, how much of the gross value added or GDP is coming from agriculture and allied activities? 16.8%. So these countries, the industrialized nations, have just 3% to 5% of their population occupied in agriculture. So we need to bring this down. UMIC stands for upper middle income countries. You should be knowing this. Then India's macroeconomic stability offers some hope. Real GDP growth volatility in India is lesser than the developed countries. It was a slip of tongue. I Hindi kam ज़्यादा बोल दिया. Now, real GDP growth volatility measured by the standard deviation. Volatility means what is the range of GDP fluctuation over the years. Okay, we have been hovering around 5 to 7%. So volatility is quite less as compared to Europe, as compared to the Western countries, as compared to the other parts of the world. So this stands in the favor of India here, that our growth volatility, when it is lesser, volatility should be less in order to attract more industries, in order for investors to make considered decisions in favor of India, setting up a project, shop, factory in India. This is better even than China. Why? Because of the trade war, currency war between US and China, because of the hostile, the attitude of the government towards the citizens. Political stability in the China is not as good as it is in India. Then gross government debt. This factor is not in India's favor. Whatever roads, whatever national highway projects that we are seeing these days, airports, etc., the swankiness is all borrowed, it seems, when it comes to India standing at around 70% of its GDP. If all the debt of India were to be paid in 1 year, 70% of its GDP would have to go towards debt retirement, debt settlement. Okay, so this is quite bad. This is what fetches us a very poor rating by Moody's, Fish, and Standard Rating also. Now, UMICs that reached high income status, 36.5% of their GDP would go towards retirement of debt if all their debt was to be paid in just 1 year. Same 48%. So this is quite high in case of India. But the good thing is that this is long term debt. This is not a short term debt. But long term in the history of a nation like India, 20 years, 30 years is not long term. External debt as the percentage of GDP, 20%. This is again a factor we can find solace in the sense that people, the money borrowed from people of India, post office, saving bank account, etc., that is a higher composition. 48% of money of India is internally borrowed. 20% is borrowed from World Bank, Asian Development Bank, etc., etc. Forex import cover. Today we are having an import cover of 8 months. If no single dollar comes into the country, we can pay for our fuel, fertilizer, food, etc., electronic imports for up to 8 months, which is a good number compared to 1991, the year in which LPG reforms were brought about. Now, these are the things here. Now, coming to the other aspects, trade openness, we have all dealt with this. Agriculture and allied activities, this is, we need to bring our population down in agriculture, or the GDP contribution of agriculture needs to go down. Commensurately, the proportion of manufacturing GDP coming from manufacturing sector needs to go up. So this is there. Agriculture still accounted for 45% of total employment in 2023, not to talk of disguised unemployment, etc. So this is there. Macroeconomic fundamentals, we have seen, I just had a look at them. So this is just a reiteration of the same points. Moving further, Parliamentary Standing Committee on Health has asked the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare to take steps to prevent underutilization of funds under Pradhan Mantri Ayushman Bharat Health Infrastructure Mission PM Abhim. Okay, so this is to support the insurance sector scheme. This is to increase the proportion of patients not going to the private sector hospitals, because private sector hospital treatment cost is very high. So we want to divert our population. We want to uh, increase the percentage of funds being allocated for PMJAY towards, they should go towards empowering of public sector healthcare. Rather than paying to the empaneled private sector healthcare hospitals, we should empower and we should give better facilities at public sector healthcare facilities. This way, the government's healthcare infrastructure, healthcare management would not be skewed in favor of the private sector. This is a very good scheme according to me, but the trend is quite worrisome. Here, you look at the funds being allocated and funds being spent. There's a huge gap. Funds allotted are more than funds spent every year. This has been the pattern for last 3 or 4 years. So these are the objectives of the scheme. I have incorporated for your convenience. Rather, I was saying inconvenience because you would have to read a little more. But it is a centrally sponsored scheme. Factual details are equally important. So now this is the largest pan India scheme for strengthening healthcare infrastructure. Okay, when COVID had struck, we talked about doctor to population ratio. Well, that is the side of MHRD, Ministry of Human Resources Development, etc. But population to bed ratio, number of hospital beds in the public sector hospitals is quite pathetic in India. That needs to be boosted up. So that is why this scheme is there. Now, sometimes we see that the public sector hospitals in far-flung areas, the primary healthcare centers, they are in a very shoddy condition, dilapidated buildings, etc. No doctor, no infrastructure, no beds. So this is where this scheme comes into picture. 12 central institutions as training and mentoring sites with 150 bedded critical care hospitals, CCBs. Strengthening of National Center for Disease Control. We have just one or two. Now, 5 new regional NCDCs and 20 metropolitan health surveillance units shall be set up, because WHO was not able to adequately predict COVID-19. Why can't we have our India's own health surveillance unit, so that whenever any disease of the level of epidemic strikes us, before it becomes an epidemic, we can check it, number of cases, etc. Okay, very good objectives, I would say, but this trend is quite worrisome. In, for example, in 2024-25, the budget estimate was 3200 crore rupees for this scheme, PM Abhim. The revised estimate was 200 crores lower, which is not quite bad, but the actual expenditure was just 2007 crore rupees, which represents 66%. That means 34% of the money was not spent and it lapsed into the Consolidated Fund of India, only to be allocated again the next year, 25-26. Then 23-24, 4200 crore rupees were allocated initially at the time of budget speech. Revised estimate was almost 50% lower. Then of this 50% lower revised estimate, only 1805 crore rupees was spent, which represents 86% of the revised estimate. But why then the pompous announcement by the finance minister, just to hog the limelight, just to get the headline in the newspaper? The budget announcements are quite big in number, bloated. But when it comes to actual implementation, this is the state of affairs. So what is the solution to it? Committee says that front loading disbursement process should be there. You open an escrow account, bank account, put the money into it on the, let's say, 30th of by 30th of April, the start of the financial year. Rather than paying the bills later on, whatever the vendor, whatever the contractor, he raises the bill for the repair of the hospital, you pay him afterwards. Rather than doing this kind of a phenomena, you put the money into the bank account of the Pradhan Mantri Abhim Yojana under the district collector, so that funds are spent. Rather than the DMs or the state governments begging for the funds, you front load the funds. Okay, release a larger portion of the annual budget in the very first quarter itself. That is why I said 30th April or maximum June. Then states submitting detailed project implementation plans contingent upon, of course, states have to prepare their plans on time, which is where we lack. Now, overall completion rate, project execution delays. Of the 13,000 component units approved, only 5,600 have been completed. Broadly, you can memorize this data because you have to substantiate everything you read and study with the help of the data that you study here. Okay, citation of data is equally important. Now, urban arms have the highest completion rate, 50%. Other components including block public health units, BPHUs, integrated public health laboratories, and critical care blocks are lagging behind. Okay, so these components, the good ones and the bad ones in terms of performance, in terms of completion, are cited here. So scheme check, you talk about the budget estimate, revised estimates. This year, not to my surprise, like every year, this trend is quite visible across all these budget outlays. Schemes you talk about, okay, so many schemes are allocated money to hog the limelight at the time of the budget announcement, but later on we see that when media is silent, everything is silent, we see this type of an affair that budget is not actually spent. Okay, so this is the data. You can memorize a bit of data, but crunch the numbers in a manner that you round it up to 5300, 7800, so that it becomes easier for you to memorize. Now, this is all the report here. I'm not going line by line, but you got it as to how can we frame a question out of it and how can we answer the question with the help of this data and other findings. Pardon me for the background noise, if any you are able to hear. Now, coming to this other aspects of this scheme here, to fill the gaps in the health infrastructure, especially in critical and primary healthcare. These are the objectives. A snapshot of the objectives and the mission is given in the beginning also, and detailed version of it is given at the last also, so you can read out the objectives of the scheme. Some questions I will be posting on the Telegram channel today based upon these factual information that we have shared with you through the medium of this DNA. Now, India adds 6 properties to tentative list for UNESCO recognition. A set of 6 properties. This is purely factual. What are the sites? Everything you can read here. Kangar Valley National Park in Chhattisgarh. So, India has nominated these sites for UNESCO to consider them in a way, right? Then Mudumal megalithic menhirs in Telangana, Ashokan edict sites, then in along the modern routes. Then 64 Yogini temples, multiple states, across multiple states. Gupta temples in North India, multiple states. The palace fortresses of the Bundelas in Madhya Pradesh. These are the 6 sites. At present, we have a total of 43 properties from India that have been given the tag of UNESCO World Heritage Site. It helps us attract tourism into our country. It helps better protect these monuments of historic importance, including 35 in the cultural category, 7 in the natural, and 1 in the mixed category. So, cultural category is your dance forms, etc. Natural category, your fauna, flora, etc. Mixed category, a mix of both. Now, tentative list is an inventory of the property each country intends to consider for UNESCO nomination. So, tentative is the first stage, then nomination is the second, and ultimate inscription by UNESCO is the third and final stage, which is what gives the tag of UNESCO World Heritage Site to the property being nominated by the country. Addition to World Heritage Centers, tentative list is mandatory if a property is to be nominated for inscription to the World Heritage List in future. So this is there. Now, maybe 3 years down the line or 2 years down the line, we would be able to see UNESCO nomination consideration for these sites. So 64 Yogini temples, they are highly important. I mean, that is why a bit of detail on these 64 Yogini temples is there. You can read it for yourself, not to prolong the DNA. I'm not reading out the things which can be read out by you yourself for your own convenience. Okay, with this, we end the DNA for the day. I hope you're liking it. Please keep on telling us about the feedback in the form of the feedback below this video session. And the link of the Telegram channel where the PDF will be shared is given in the description box of this video, guys. Thank you. It was a pleasure teaching you. Tomorrow being Sunday, there will be no DNA, but I'll be posting 5 to 10 questions on the Telegram channel so as to help you test your retention power, test your knowledge insofar as current affairs, memorization of current affairs is concerned. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.